beyond excited. It's our first livestock and it's just a dream come true. I cannot explain to you how long I've dreamt of having bees. I can't explain to you how long we've saved up to get the bees, because it's not cheap to start beekeeping. I don't think it's cheap anywhere, and it's especially not cheap here. But they're here. They're finally here. Keeping bees has been a lifelong dream for me, and when we were buying this house, I said to my husband, the compromise of us not getting a farm is that I get to keep bees and chickens as a minimum, those two. So ever since we bought the house, I knew we were going to have bees and eventually we'll get chickens. And now the bees are here, and we're taking that first leap into actually having some livestock as well. We haven't as adults had a pet. I'm not a big fan of the whole, to be a homesteader you have to have animals thought. I think you can be a homesteader in many ways in this day and age, but now that I have the bees, I do realize that it just adds another dimension. It's been quite the journey to get here to where we actually have bees on our property. First of all, it was quite the journey to save up for them. I knew beekeeping was expensive. I didn't know it was this expensive. Oh my! You don't have to be a member of the Beekeepers Association in Denmark to keep bees, but it is strongly encouraged, and if you are a member, you get certain benefits. You get insurance both on your bees, so if they harm anyone, you are fully insured, and also on the honey. So when you sell your honey, surplus honey, that honey is insured under their policies. You obviously still have to do all the right things and such, but if you do that, you are insured. That was almost 1,000 Danish crowns to be a member for a year. And then there was all the equipment, the hives, the tools. I was able to buy a starter pack from the association where you get it cheaper by being a member. And that starter pack really set me up well, I think. For Christmas and for my birthday, all I asked for was money for bees. Money for bees, please give me money for bees. And I was very, very lucky to get generous amounts from several family members, and all that money and some of our own money went into buying that starter pack and to buying a membership, and I also had to buy a family of bees. I will often refer to them as families because that's what we call them in Danish. We refer to them as a family, but I think in English the proper way is to call them colonies. So if you ever hear me talk about a bee family, just know I mean a colony. I'll try to see if I can work in the correct lingo. When you're new to something and you have to learn the terminology, that can be quite difficult. And in my case, I have to learn the terminology in 2 languages simultaneously, and that is proving to be interesting. I'm also very fortunate in that I have a guy a few houses down the street who also keeps bees, and he has sort of taken me under his wing, and he has become my mentor, and I am ever so grateful. I've been able to join him a few times working his bees, and now he's coming alongside me as well as I work my bees, showing me what to look for and telling me what is actually happening. I think for any new beekeeper, that's such a wonderful resource. I would have loved to take the course from the local association. Every spring, the local brand of the National Association has a course for beekeepers, and I had signed up for that, but sadly it got cancelled because of some illness on the instructor's part, and I pray that person is perfectly fine by now. But it was really sad, and I was quite scared to be getting my bees, not knowing anything, practically speaking. I've read books, but there's such a huge jump from reading about keeping an animal to actually handling that animal and working with them. And I think especially with bees, you can read so much, but until you stand with them, amongst them, and hear the buzzing, you don't fully know how you'll react. And I found that being with the bees really centers me. I am forced to be present in the moment. I am forced to move slowly and control my movements to a very high degree. I'm forced to be observant and really look and really listen. And it heightens my senses in a way I never thought working with an animal like that would do. If you've been watching my garden updates, and I'll link the playlist, you will know that I've been waiting not so patiently for the bees, and I've just been waiting for the weather to warm up. And as you can probably tell from my last few videos, I have been able to be outside in my dresses and not with giant sweaters on, not with many layers on, and we have had some quite warm days. It's not summer warm by any means, but when you go from really cold it feels warm. And in the morning we still have like 2-3 degrees Celsius mornings, so it's quite cold still at night, but I think we're past the frost. I might have a small freeze, but nothing major, hopefully. So it warmed up enough for the hives to be opened and for the inspector to come. In Denmark, it's illegal to buy or sell or even move your bees without them being inspected. So if you move from one home to another and you bring your bees, you need them to be inspected before you can legally move them. So the inspector came and inspected the bees where the owner had them, and they got the all clear. So the colony I ended up purchasing was supposed to be 10 frames. That was the deal, but it had grown bigger than that. So I ended up getting 12 frames, and that's one box plus another. There's 2 frames in it, and obviously we put in a total of 10 frames in the box. And they came on Saturday, and we inspected them Sunday, and they had already started drawing out the wax on the frames next to the 2 frames in the top box, and that was just amazing to see how quick they were working. They'd also already started to use propolis to glue everything together, and it was so cool to see. Besides inspecting them the next day, we also put in a drone frame. As you do in most of the world, we suffer from Varroa mites in Denmark as well, and we use something called the secure way. In Danish it's called den sikre vej, and it's a 3-step Varroa treatment. And the first spring step is to use a drone frame, and what it is it's essentially a frame like this, and you put 2, so you have the entire frame and you split it into 3 sections, and you have no comb in there, you have no wax for the bees to work with. And what we are hoping to achieve is that the bees choose to build drone cells in those. And when you have one section that has been built as drone frames and eggs and been laid, they've turned into larvae, and they've been mostly sealed, most of them sealed. You cut out that section and you throw it away. And it sounds brutal, but it is really one of the gentlest ways to combat the Varroa mite. And if the larvae had turned into proper bees, they would have willingly given their lives to defend the colony. So I don't see a big problem with it. And if you do, you probably shouldn't be a beekeeper. You know how they say in gardening, you have to kill a lot of plants to become a gardener? I think you have to kill a lot of bees to become a successful beekeeper. I have a feeling that's the way it goes. It was also really interesting to have 2 other beekeepers on the property along with my mentor, because it became very obvious that whenever you have 3 beekeepers together, you have at least 4 different opinions on the correct way to do something. All I have is head knowledge. I have no practical experience right now, although I am starting to gain it. But it was just so entertaining to hear them exchange opinions on which frames were best or which hives were better and why you would do a certain thing, why you would use a certain treatment or not. We did have a small misunderstanding with the previous owners. For some reason, we had misunderstood what sort of frame they kept their bees on. They still fit in our hive boxes, but they are different from ours. If you're familiar with different kind of frames, they are using the Hoffman frame, and we are using the same size but with blocks of spaces instead of the frame being like this thick and then narrowing in. So the ones that start out thick and then narrow, those are called Hoffman frames, and the ones we have are the same size all the way down but have spacing blocks at the top. So once we can move the bees out of the frames, we are going to return the frames to the previous owner. It just seems to be easier when you use the same frames in the entire box. We've also noticed a big increase in bees in the garden already, and that is absolutely lovely. We had a lot of bees last year because my mentor down the street had a lot of bees last year. Sadly, his bees didn't make the winter this year, and he's been keeping bees for 10 years, I think, and I believe it's the first time he's lost all of them. So he's still not quite sure what happened. There's indication that it might be colony collapse, and we're really hoping that's not the case. I'm also really happy to have the bees before the apple tree, the pear tree, and all the fruit bushes and all of that starts blooming. It's going to be really lovely to have this squash and the zucchini and everything planted, and have the bees right there in the kitchen garden. Every morning they get out, the first thing they see is a kitchen garden, and of course they are going to forage in a wide area. They fly in a radius of 2 kilometers, so they have a really large area they forage in. But my kitchen garden is right next to them, so hopefully they are going to stop by and visit my garden a lot. At some point, when I get more confident in working with the bees and in filming when my neighbors are out and such, I will take you along when I work the bees. But for now, I cannot focus on anything else. I don't want to focus on anything else when I'm with the bees. I just want to be fully present, and I'm loving having the bees just for the pollination, but I would be lying if I didn't admit that we are really hoping to get a lot of honey from the bees as well. I would like to harvest honey not just for our own use, but for small-scale sale as well. It would be really nice to be able to sell to a few friends and family, recoup a bit of the cost of having bees. I am keeping really good track of our expenses for the garden, for the bees and everything. The reason I keep really good track of the expenses is that we do this not just as a hobby. If homesteading was purely a hobby for us, it wouldn't matter how much things cost. But we want this to be part of our lifestyle in a much bigger way than a hobby could be. We want to make this something that may not be able to pay for itself very quickly, but along the way we want it to pay for itself. And we want to do that by creating a cottage industry. And I plan to do various things in that business. I hope to be able to harvest enough honey, not this year, but in the coming years, to sell some of it and have that be part of it. I hope to be able to harvest a lot of lavender and make different lavender creations to sell. And when I harvest that lavender, for some of the things I have in mind, I won't be using the stems, I will only be using the flowers. And those stems can be dried if they aren't already when I harvest them, and they can be used as tinder in your smoker. And supposedly, and this is only supposedly because I obviously haven't tried it and I don't know anyone in person who has, but I have heard several people on YouTube talking about the lavender tinder and the smoke from the lavender being cool, which is something you want because you don't want hot smoke on your bees, you want cool smoke on them. And the other side of using lavender is that you actually get that calming effect lavender has on us humans. That works on the bees as well from the stems. And if we can take one piece of the expenses and replace with something we can grow on our own property, which is a plant that will come back every year and produce for us without much input at all, that will be a great step towards making it more profitable. It's not the determining factor in everything we do here to make things profitable or replace cost for us, but it is part of our mindset. My dream for the bee yard is to have 4 or 5 hives max. I think that will give us a lot of honey in good years, and I think that will be still a manageable amount to keep track of and to handle on a day-to-day basis. And I also think it will be an amount that won't drown our yard in bees. So that's the beginning of our beekeeping adventure. If you want to support this channel and our beekeeping in future years, do so completely free by subscribing. That helps the Lavender project and it helps the bees and it helps us grow and turn our home into a homestead and making it a profitable one.